Go ahead, Mr. Neff.
Counsel. Ms. Thomas.
Counsel.
May it please the court. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. And before really beginning, I do want to thank you on behalf of Ms. Hughes and myself. A lot of you have taken sacrifices in your personal life to be here. Unlike many trials in Wapello County, this one is expected to take, give or take, more than a week. And we understand that's a big sacrifice for you all. Now that being said, juries play a role of the utmost importance in our system in the United States. Frankly, you guys find the facts, decide what the facts are, and our role, the defense's role, this court's role, to seek justice could not be met without you. So we appreciate the time you're spending here, your citizens' duty of being here. So thank you. I'd also like to take this time to apologize. And by that, I simply mean many of you have lived normal lives. You do not see, well, pretty much everyone else that works in this courtroom tends to see on a daily basis. We're going to have to look at very difficult evidence, hear testimony on difficult topics. You will have to see medical examiner autopsy photos throughout this trial. And just keep in mind, you will see lots of very difficult images. If you need a break at any time, it is perfectly allowable for you to ask for that break. Because this whole trial will revolve around one particular act. And that is, through all the evidence that we intend to present to you through this trial, we expect to prove that the last moments Cloe Chandler experienced on this earth were watching her own mother strangle her and rob the last breaths from her life. Now, as the court said, there are different reasons why, different rules of evidence, schedules, why witnesses are presented in the order they're presented. We will try to present things to you in as chronological and understandable of a way. But because certain things sometimes keep us from doing that, I want to walk you through what we intend to prove to you and what we intend to present to you so that you know what to focus on. You will have the chance to keep notes. And through this opening, I'm hoping to give you a roadmap. Times where you should pay particular attention to the evidence. Because frankly, over days of testimony, things can get lost. But to reach the ultimate goal of justice, we need you to pay attention throughout. We intend to prove to you through our evidence that on July 2018, July 19th, 2018, Cloe Chandler, granddaughter of Callie Cookett, second cousin of Brittany Johnson, and sister of her baby brother Phoenix, was killed by her mother, the defendant, Kelsie Thomas. You'll hear testimony of how law enforcement and firefighters arrived on scene around 3:30, 3:40 on that day. You'll hear testimony from Corey Binge from the Tumwa Fire Department. I believe he's the chief deputy firefighter. He'll testify to you how he was the first on scene and came into the home, went into Chloe's room, and found her lifeless. He'll testify to you how he found her body cold to the touch, how he tried to resuscitate her and could not get essentially a life reading, how he found her airway was blocked by vomit. You'll then hear from all other law enforcement officers, particularly pay attention to Sergeant Leffler and Chief McAndrew, Not only will they explain how Cloe was taken from her home to the hospital, just chronology, but Sergeant Leffler will testify about how Ms. Thomas explained what happened to Cloe. You'll even see video, because he recorded video and audio of his conversations with Ms. Thomas at the hospital. We'll present that to you. You'll be able to evaluate it. And of particular importance when you're listening to that testimony and listening to that video, pay attention to the demeanor of Ms. Thomas. Pay attention to how clear she is on specific circumstances, because this is the first time, this is the first story she gives as to how Cloe died. You'll hear her essentially talk to law enforcement, state that she wanted to put Cloe down for a nap because she wanted to take a nap. It was around 12 to 1 that she puts Cloe down in Chloe's room for a nap, and then goes to take a nap herself. She wakes up around 3:15 to her alarm to get ready for work, because she works a shift later in the day, and that she supposedly comes into Chloe's room to find her, doesn't see her on the bed, goes to the closet, and finds her hanging there. You'll hear on the video of how she specifically notes that Chloe's hanging for pajama pants. That she lifts Cloe from the closet, those pajama pants, that knot just comes undone on its own. And she takes her to Chloe's bed, where ravioli comes out of her mouth through vomit, because Cloe had eaten ravioli for lunch that day. It's important because you'll have to compare it to her later statements. And kind of like during jury selection, we talked about different aspects of seeing how people tell the truth. I won't go through that now, but you need to pay attention to these statements to weigh their credibility. Because you'll also hear testimony later on from Callie, Kelsie's mother and the grandmother of Cloe Chandler, 5-year-old girl. You'll hear Callie testify about how on the day, July 19th, at about 8:30, she hasn't learned that Chloe's dead yet, but she did see some things on Facebook. So she calls Kelsie Thomas. Kelsie Thomas picks up. Callie asks her, "What are you doing?" She says, "I'm eating dinner." Callie then asks her, "Is Chloe okay?" And Kelsie Thomas responds, "How did you find out?" You'll learn later on from medical professionals how Chloe was declared dead at about 4 o'clock on July 19th. Pay attention to those details, because the context of that call 4 hours after a mother finds out her 5-year-old daughter is dead gives you a lot of insight into the mental state of that person, of that mother, of Kelsie Thomas. You'll hear Callie testify as well about how Kelsie had Chloe, what age, how those things went. You'll learn that Kelsie had Chloe when she was 16 from a guy who cheated on her, left her. And more importantly, you'll learn from Callie how Kelsie met a new man, Aaron Thomas. They married, they had another child, Phoenix. And how Callie describes Kelsie behaving around Chloe after Phoenix is born will be incredibly important, because we expect that you'll learn the context of this relationship. How Kelsie grew distant from Chloe, became more irritated with Chloe, and how Kelsie asked Callie on prior occasions if she would take Chloe. Once again, this goes to context, so pay attention to it. You'll next hear from Brittany Johnson during this trial. Now, Brittany Johnson is the cousin of Kelsie Thomas, is the second cousin of Cloe. And you'll learn how on July 20th, the day after Cloe dies, Brittany had a conversation with Kelsie Thomas. You'll learn about quite a few statements, but of particular interest, keep notes about when Brittany describes how Kelsie Thomas talked about Cloe. One of the first things they talk about is how Kelsie Thomas is angry that Facebook and the media has already gotten hold of this case and people are already talking about it. About how Kelsie Thomas had been depressed days before and posted on Facebook about how she was unhappy or something to that effect. More importantly, Brittany will explain to you what Kelsie said about why. The why was she was getting angry and sad again, recalling how the man she had Cloe with when she was 16 cheated on her and left her. How Cloe reminded her of that man. And even up to that July 20th date, noted that Chloe's behaviors as she grew, because she was 5 when she died, how Chloe's behaviors showed an attitude just like the guy that cheated on Kelsie and left her, and how it bothered her. We expect that you'll hear testimony from different law enforcement officers that interview Kelsie Thomas, but you won't just hear from them, you will see video, hear audio of those interviews. You'll learn that the medical examiner, Michelle Cavalier, took an autopsy of Cloe Chandler. We'll look at the photos, she'll explain her findings, what she found on the physical body of Kelsie. What Kelsie's body essentially tells you and testifies to you, even though she's not here to testify to you herself. You'll find out that investigators learned before their interviews from the medical examiner that when Dr. Cavalier, the medical examiner, evaluated this body, compared it to the story that Kelsie Thomas gives of the hanging, made numerous findings that did not align with a child or person generally hanging in the way that Kelsie Thomas said she found Cloe. Now you'll hear testimony about how this autopsy established that ligature marks, fancy word for marks of choking, indicated strangulation, indicated this wasn't just a hanging, indicated that due to hemorrhages inside the neck, a struggle occurred. Dr. Cavalier will describe different suspicious bruises, describe, and you'll hear this term, frankly, it's a medical term, you don't have to understand it. She'll describe how on the hyoid bone there was hemorrhaging. And she'll explain the importance of that in determining whether someone is choked, strangled, asphyxiated through a hanging or through a struggle with another. Dr. Cavalier will talk about how she explained these findings to investigators. These investigators are going to be Don Schnitker and Michael Sear. You'll see them in videos interviewing Kelsie Thomas. They interviewed her on 2 days, July 24th and July 26th. Less than 10 days from the death of a mother's 5-year-old. Pay attention once again to Kelsie Thomas's demeanor, particularly on the 24th. Pay attention to the tactics they use, because we expect you'll hear how they let Kelsie Thomas leave the room when she wanted to. We expect you'll hear how when she wanted water, they got her a bottle of water. We expect that you'll hear that whenever she wanted a bathroom break, she got it. And she could talk to anybody she wanted. She could walk out the door. And in fact, the doors were unlocked. Pay attention through the July 24th clips that you'll see, because in particular there are certain phrases that you'll have to evaluate to determine Kelsie Thomas's credibility. Frankly, we expect you'll hear from July 24th that she continually says she did not hurt Cloe. You'll see from the investigators that pretty early on they are upfront with her that they believe she did it, or that at the very least this did not happen like she said it happened. They will ask her if she's covering for someone else, if they have to look into Aaron Thomas, her husband. You'll see certain conversations, and we expect you'll hear them talking about how Kelsie had 2 children, had to work, had a home to take care of. And they'll ask her, have you ever had a break? In particular, pay attention to her answer when she shrugs and says, "Now." And put that into the context of a medical exam, what it shows, Kelsie Thomas's claims of not being involved, and what it shows. We also expect that you'll see from July 24th to the 26th how the investigators arrange another meeting. How Kelsie Thomas tells them she wants to keep talking to them. She wants to prove that she didn't do this. You'll see how they set up the interview for July 26th, how Kelsie Thomas was to come on her own. She did. You'll learn all those details showing how that July 26th interview took place. And then you'll see the July 26th interview. And on that interview, you will see Kelsie Thomas initially deny being involved in Cloe's death beyond taking her out of the closet, to admitting that Cloe was never in that closet. How she had left that morning, early in the morning, to take her father. Kelsie took her father to a doctor's appointment. How she took Phoenix with her, but she didn't want to take Cloe, because Cloe just acts out. How she didn't give breakfast to Cloe, and she left her at the home. You'll learn how she went to Walmart with her father in Phoenix. And on this video, we expect that she'll then say how she came back home around noon. How Cloe came to the door and opened it for her mom, told her, "I miss you." And how Kelsie then goes in and sees Cloe was watching TV, was out of her room, and how she shouldn't have been. And think of the context of that relationship as well, because that will matter quite a bit in understanding these dynamics and deciding what's credible and what's not in this case. Kelsie, in this second video, will talk about how she wanted Cloe to take a nap because she was just so tired. She had worked the night before. She usually works late shifts, which is why she was going to get up at 3:15 for another shift. And you'll learn how Cloe she doesn't behave. She goes out of her room when she's not supposed to. She tries getting food from the kitchen when she's not supposed to. She gets into the cabinets as a 5-year-old isn't supposed to. And then Kelsie will tell you how she got frustrated, got angry, and looped some pajama pants around Cloe's neck and tightened, possibly twisted, and started choking Cloe. She'll describe different things that are of particular importance in light of the medical examiner's testimony. 2 points that are particularly important is that she'll describe Cloe's eyes as they looked at Kelsie, and they bulged. Now it's important because the medical examiner will explain the importance of that in comparing it to a strangulation versus a hanging. Kelsie will also tell you how Cloe's body, there's a bit of a struggle Then she started twitching, and then went limp. That's also important because you'll have to compare it to the medical examiner's testimony when it comes to how bodies react, how a child's body reacts. But that is not going to be the only evidence that we'll present to you of Kelsie confessing. Once she is out of questioning with law enforcement, you will hear audio evidence that we'll present to you of jail calls. They're recorded. And you'll hear Kelsie Thomas calling Aaron Thomas, her husband, and telling him something to the effect of, "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to do this. It was an accident. You've got to believe me." And once again, context is incredibly important. You'll hear Aaron Thomas's reply saying something to the effect of, "Stop talking. You need a lawyer." That's important because it tells you the context of what she means when she's saying, "I'm sorry." It gives you context of what she means when she says, "I didn't mean to do this." This case is about context, but more importantly, it's about how a 5-year-old girl, Cloe, died. And how Kelsie Thomas took her life without any justification. You'll also read a letter written by Kelsie Thomas at the end of her interviews with law enforcement saying that she's sorry for doing this, that she needed help, and that her family should have stepped in and helped her. You'll see the time she spends writing that note, and you'll get to decide whether that's coerced or not, whether that's credible or not. And frankly, you'll see all the rest of the letter, and you'll get to decide what type of person would write it to some extent. You'll get to decide the credibility of the person that writes that wording in light of everything else. By the end of the state's presentation of evidence, we expect that you find Kelsie Thomas guilty for homicide in the first degree for killing her daughter, for wrapping pajama pants around her neck and strangling her, and then admitting to it through interviews with law enforcement, but also interviews with her own, or discussions with her own husband during a jail phone call. In light of all that evidence, we expect that you'll come to what we will assert is the only reasonable outcome in this case, and that is that Kelsie Thomas murdered her daughter. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.